Okay, so this is Thistle Pedersen reporting for WLRN. I'm at Cinema Sisters in the barn, and it's a women-only space, and we've got some women that are talking about the Butch Fem Dichotomy and also their experiences being in the lesbian community with a multiple plethora of identities and just lots of cultural waves rippling out. And so we're going to start with, and I don't know if they're going to say their names. Feel free to say your name before you speak if you want. But you were talking about androgyny as a thing back in the day. So go ahead.
I'm Bim, and I started doing the Boston bars in a particular bar in Boston about 1969, 1970. And the people there were totally into Butch Fem and divided you as such. And my partner and I came in, and we were sort of like at the beginning of the androgynous movement, which that was the time of Sonny and Cher, and in the straight world you couldn't tell the men from the women to begin with, and that's where we found Butches.
But you knew you were women, and you embraced your womanhood.
We were women, we were lesbians, and we weren't going to be defined except as an androgynous, and so we really weren't.
And so who were the Butches back then? And how did you distinguish?
In the bars at that point, they distinguished many different types. We had the Butches that in the outside world wore men's clothing and passed as men in order for jobs.
Yeah, it tended to be blue collar, shift work.
One of them was an engineer.
Yeah, I mean,
Right. And it was only in the bars that they could let loose and say, I'm really a lesbian.
Yeah.
And lesbian was the word at that time. And in all honesty, the butchier I looked on the outside, the more feminine my underwear was. And I was just, to this day.
Interesting. So, but earlier in the discussion you were talking about how it's this internal something that comes from within, and I really am fascinated by that because their hair, and how is that something that's like...
Which is the misnomer, because it... So when I came out into andro world, right? Everyone was androgynous. We all wore blue jeans and t-shirts and boots, right?
And flannel shirts.
And flannel shirts. But I hung out with some old school dykes who were like Jackie, who was 10 years older than me, who taught me a lot about what Butch Femme meant. And I think, here's what I think some of the descriptions are. That Butches live in their body differently. They move differently than femmes do. That they sit in their body in a more embedded way. That femmes use their sexuality as a call and response to Butches. Mm-hmm. And I think Butch Femme side. So,
Could you say that one more time? I lost my connection. It's a great analogy. You're talking about eggs. Eggs is a perfect metaphor for...
So that Butches are hard-boiled on the outside and all goo on the inside. And femmes are soft on the outside and hard-boiled on the inside.
Right. Okay. So that's kind of them's fighting words. Is there a fight going on between Butches and femmes? I know at family reunion they had this wonderful tug of war between the Butches and the femmes.
And who won?
Yeah.
The femmes.
Well, how did they win? What were their tactics? How did they win? They used their sexuality distraction.
You don't have to respond.
Yes, hoist on their own petard, as it were, yes.
And there are times
It's
when
playful. It's not a real fight.
No,
Not as if it were a real
Butches
fight.
don't exist without femmes. and femmes don't exist without butches.
It's a
Because-
symbiotic relationship
Right, it's a
in its
quality
ideal
of life.
form, because we know there's domestic violence in the lesbian community.
That's not
We know
just
this.
with butch femmes,
You
that's
know.
just, yeah.
That's out there.
Right, but when you start reading like that feminist theory, like by Sheila Jeffries and stuff, she definitely has this criticism of the butch femme dichotomy and says that it's following patriarchy and patriarchal sex-based gender roles of,
On
you
the
know, the
surface,
femme
it
wearing
looks
the,
like
you know, the
It
skirts
can be
and
viewed that way, but it's not necessarily what's
not
going on
necessarily, but in
interpersonal.
statistically speaking, in lesbian relationships, there can be this element and dynamic playing out when there's a situation of domestic abuse, you know. And that's not to say
domestic abuse is not necessarily from the butchers, right?
Okay.
Right.
I mean, like that goes.
That's a
in
whole
lesbian
other-
community. It's a whole other issue. That goes always.
Yeah.
Right. It does, because I was abused in a lesbian relationship.
I was too.
Right, and the woman who abused me, well, I don't know how she now identifies.
What does that mean to be a stone butch? Is that okay to?
From my experience, she didn't want me to do anything to her. She wanted to be in complete control, and she couldn't surrender to
Yeah.
me, even
So you mean sexually?
sexually.
Stone butch. They don't have sexual pleasure?
Oh, they totally.
She
Oh, they
totally
do,
had sexual
but-
pleasure, but it's on her own terms.
Yeah.
And
With
by
her own-
giving it.
Exactly.
Right. A stone butch makes love to someone else, but you can't make love to her.
Right.
Never put your finger in a dike.
Exactly. She wouldn't even let me touch her breasts. Like, she wouldn't let me even do that.
Yeah.
Oh, weird. Okay, so what kind of dynamic do you think this is, like, in terms of the larger picture of, well, you know, patriarchy, but then also our own women's community? Like, if this is a type, a stone butch, you know, it's something that's known within the culture. What put it there? How did it evolve? Where did it come from?
Some of it was during the time the police were raiding the bars, and they would round up the butches, and then in jail.
Is that in the 80s?
Oh, earlier.
70s? 50s?
Yeah.
Okay.
Going way back, and they would rape and sexually abuse these women
Yeah.
in jail by the police. And I can see not being touched. Can you imagine what they went through?
And she did have a history of abuse and being abused.
Right.
And I mean, abuse is something that gets talked about in lesbian community in a way that it doesn't get talked about in straight community, I think.
Or maybe even gay male community?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
It's a different.
And I think that different women and different groups of women have different ways of dealing with it. And I get the stone butch thing. I had a friend who was a stone butch, and she explained to me that she was very ashamed of her body.
Oh,
And,
so.
and also to kind of have someone touch your breast makes you a woman.
Right.
And if you are being women who don't yet understand the power of being a female, and that's the thing I also want to make clear. It's not like butches aren't women.
Right.
Butches,
Are.
many butches
definitely.
accept fully their kind of femaleness.
But you're saying in the stone butch, which is a distinct type within the butch heading,
It's a response to abuse of some sort,
she's having a hard time with her female body.
Yeah.
They only
And-
feel power in the
And so what's the
masculine.
difference between a stone butch and a trans man in today's language?
Well, I know many trans men who like to have sex and like to be made love.
And they
to.
feel good about
Yeah.
their female body.
Right.
If they felt good about their female body, why would they be binding their breasts then?
Well,
You
so
know?
let's not get off on trans, because that kind of subverts
That
the
brings
butch.
us to the current moment, and maybe we're still in the past here a little bit.
And all of us identify as women and identify as lesbians.
Yeah.
What did you say?
All of us that are talking to you now identify as women and identify as lesbians.
Exactly. And that's the even larger, the L is the big
Yeah.
umbrella for all of us.
And part of it, and I love Sheila Jeffries, part of where she's wrong is there are differences with butch femme and male and female, right? And one of them is that for many men, their gig is they want to get off, right? For many butches, their gig is they want their femme.
Always true.
Yeah, and that's a different dynamic. And butches are not always tops.
Right.
I love me some Butch bottoms. You know?
Well, it's complicated, right? It's so complicated, and it is, even though we're in a woman-born woman loving community, you can't just shake off all this stuff, you know, because we don't, and so there's this baggage that comes along with it. And being able to dissect it, I think, and have an appreciation of history and how the women evolved through time and where it all comes from, I think is going to help us to really live out our mission of being that woman-loving, woman-born, woman-centered universe, yoniverse in the femisphere.
I think where we get off base is women who don't want to be seen as being femme because they see femme as being weak. And Jackie Anderson, who is a really powerful African-American theorist, explained to me one time, part of the problem with you white women is who were, up until like the 80s, who were the white female role models? Marilyn Monroe, capital D victim. Who were the black female role models? Tina Turner kicked her some ass, right? So,
although her partner really abused her, right? And she stayed with him,
and then she left, and then she triumphed.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Okay, what decade was that? 80s?
She dumped, I think. She was
Dumped. What was his name?
Yeah,
70s.
The 70s.
Ike.
Yeah.
Okay.
So white women and black women had different female role models, right? Up until like the Madonna thing, which took us in a different direction from Marilyn. So many people don't want to identify. Many lesbians don't want to identify with being femme because they see it as being weak or feminine. And I don't see femme as feminines. Many of the femmes I've known are physically strong, use power tools, will kick your ass, can be very verbally aggressive.
Can we just say they're not femmes, though? Can they just be women that
they identify
They
as femmes?
they identify themselves
I
as
think
femmes?
is the important thing, what the individual identifies.
Folks, but I just think like there's got to be a way for women to just say I'm a woman.
There absolutely is.
You know,
not everyone is butch femme, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about butch femme, we have to identify what that is. And I think the differences are butches live in their body differently. There's a different emotional response, and it's a
okay, I'm trying to keep this connection with the internet. All right, so now we've got Amos is going to talk. I've got you.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's
Go ahead,
what's
Amos.
going on
So-
between Eli and I.
Yeah. Depending upon what community you came out in was whether you were considered or had to self-identify as butch or femme. What was butch in one community might very well be considered very femme in another. The mores of different bars, different communities differed. Like in one bar that I frequented in one city coming out, there was something called the Butch's Dance, and God forbid a femme got up to participate in that dance, whether she self-identified as butch. If the community didn't identify her as butch, she got driven off the dance floor.
So, and is that a form of woman-on-woman oppression somehow, or
You know
what is that?
I think it's like the butches going out and doing a mating dance is what it was.
Yeah.
They were strutting.
Right, and identity does not exist. There are community agreements about what this means. It's the same thing as someone who comes in to a community, is married to a man, has never slept with a woman, goes home to him every night, and still fucks men, doesn't fuck women, and calls herself a lesbian.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean the community has to accept that identity.
Right.
It gets really, really confusing why we were sort of off air. The question, so one of the women said, I've always thought of you as butch, and yet in reality, in today's terms, I would consider myself a soft butch and I would think others would consider myself a soft butch, but I'm still not into the butch femme thing because the woman that I'm attracted to also would be considered soft butches.
So that makes you
So
a homosexual.
I love it.
Oh, that's great. Sheila Jeffries, I hope you're listening to that.
I love it.
But at one point you remarked about two women we know about, it's two butches together, and you're just not sure how that works with them because they're both strong butches.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, too, to bring it up to current, now I identify as an andro femme.
Okay.
So when I came out, butchers and femmes dressed alike, right?
Right.
We all wore blue jeans and flannel shirts. We dressed alike. We knew who was butch. We knew who was femme. We knew that there.
How'd you know if you were all dressing alike?
It had nothing to do with
It was
the way
that
we dressed.
internal thing you
That-
were talking
hey,
about.
how do you know gaydar?
Yeah.
Right.
I get it. Okay.
Right. It's
All right.
the,
It was an
it's
energetic
that glance in
thing.
the eye. It's a call and response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A
I like
mating
that call and
dance.
response.
It's,
Okay.
As Amos said, like the butchers would do a mating dance, the femmes couldn't be there because they were performing it for the femmes.
Yeah.
Oh, the butch strut of all those years at
Yeah.
Mish Fel-
Think about it, it was the butch strut and the femme parade.
And now
Oh,
what has
funny.
happened, I think, is that the same way that butch has morphed into trans men, femme has morphed into highly sexualized, corseted, burlesque type.
Constriction.
Right, exactly. And so this is where, we as feminists analyzing what's happening in society, understand this is a misogynistic thrust in both camps, you know, and so that's why I think it's good to dig deep and analyze any sort of butch-femme type of dichotomy. Look at all of the different things that flow from that, and be able to love women as women, just women. That's it. You know, adult females, like maybe even moving a little bit away from always having to sexualize the female, always having to think about her sexuality, and you know, not that we wouldn't enjoy that in our own quarters, but that it's not our personhood. We're citizens of matriarchy, you know. Anyway.
Right. And to me, it's important to be true to ourselves, whatever that self is, and going back to the butch strut and the femme parade. In some years, I was in both because I'm
Right.
comfortable enough with myself and my body in
Right.
its play.
And the playful, you know, and that was with the tug of war at Framley too.
Oh, it's very
They people would switch sides, you know, like they would just all of a sudden jump to the other side. And,
Right.
And yeah, I really enjoyed that a
I
lot.
want to hear from Ashley about kind of how you came out and how you settled on where you are.
Well, when I first came out, I was with a man, and then until I met my first partner when I was 21, and she was a stone butch, and so I was just, I didn't know what to do. You know, I didn't know. I thought that that's how it was. Like I thought that, you know, I was attracted to her, and she didn't want me to touch her, and I thought that's how it was in lesbian relationships. So I mean, that was just my starting point. So I was with her for 9 years. You know, she was abusive, and I finally left her. And then my next partner was also a butch, but she liked for me to touch her, and so that was kind of confusing because I was like, wait a minute, I thought, you know, it was the same thing. Like, she's a stone butch, I'm not supposed to touch her. She's just supposed to pleasure me. So then I discovered that it's not like that. That she actually wanted me to touch her, but it was under, like, it couldn't be, like, I couldn't do certain things to her. And it was also about control.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and then she was like, she would always used to say, you need to try a femme. If you want to touch women, you need to be with a femme.
Oh, weird.
So I was like, well, I guess I need to try a femme then.
Yeah.
Because I do. I want both. Like, I want both. You know, and want to feel equally met.
Right, and you know, Sheila Jeffries talks about that sexy is equality. Let's make equality sexy instead of someone being dominant and someone being submissive and, you know, hiding our feelings and feeling ashamed of our bodies, whatever. No, let's make sexy
Try a butch bottom.
equality. A butch bottom.
A butch bottom.
Yeah. A butch bottom is a butch that likes to be fucked.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
The old expression of
Butch on the streets,
Fem on the sheets.
That's what I've actually arrived to now.
Yeah.
Butch on the streets, Fem under the sheets. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, how do you feel about the world today and lesbians in the world, and what the role of lesbians is in the larger world that, is shaped by men for men's power and privilege, So how is lesbianism in the larger picture out there? Is it?
In my opinion,
Yeah.
lesbians are the healers of the planet.
Lesbians are the healers of the planet. Uh-huh.
And
Go ahead.
because we set standards of an egalitarian thank you, existence that doesn't exist to the same extent that exists in the best of our relationships. And I'm not saying it exists in all of our relationships, because we're not. We're all as fucked up as the rest of the population. But we have mothers and sisters that are more apt to call us on our shit, sometimes with less love than we might like. But I think that the lesbian model of society, that I do in our relationship what I am best at, and it may or may not be what society at large says I should be doing in relation with you. But we decide that mutually between ourselves, what I do and what you do,
And as
what,
equals.
and what we do together. If it's not equal, then there's consensus, or there should be. But there's just as much effed up lesbian relationships.
No, but I mean in a one-on-one like you were describing.
Yeah, but there's just as much effed up lesbian relationships there are at the big world, because the patriarchy has fucked us all over. So we've learned bad models. But the best examples that the lesbian community provides gives us examples for all of humanity on how to relate to one another as one another.
All right, so the L
That's
as
my-
her
so,
separate.
But intellectually, I would take issue with this. I think it's absolutely true, and lesbians as the healers of the world also puts women right back into that
Caretaker role.
Nurturing role. Yeah, so thank you for that. That's a great observation about that.
I think we just organically are, because women are.
It's kind of like when people idealize children too and say that they're the future, they're the ones that are going to make these big vacuum cleaners to clean up the plastic in the ocean or whatever,
I see a big difference between the lesbian feminists
Yes.
and the lesbian, or
Well, that's
someone
where I'm coming from.
lesbian in the outside world that is not a feminist. I think that where we get our sisterhood is mostly from the feminism part of us.
Absolutely. I cannot agree more with that. And there's an LGBTQ magazine in Madison that just did an article on me called Turf Wars, because I interviewed Megan Murphy and Julie Bindel on WORT, the community radio station, and so she put out this, Emily Mills put out this slander piece, and I clicked on their lesbian tab, and I was so surprised not to see my community, but to see a woman with a dark bouffant hairdo in one of the pictures for one of the articles you could click on, and it said, the title of the article was, I'm paraphrasing, was different than Better Homes and Gardens, and this is what anybody who was a Mishfest sister, I'm like, that is like, if you're going to have a lesbian tab, you need to have at least one article featuring a Mishfest sister, you know what I mean? But then there was also like religion was in there. It was like a woman becoming a pastor of a church. And then there was a family one, like getting back to family values or something. I mean, it was nuts. You should go click on it. It's called Our Lives Magazine. In fact, you should send a letter to the editor and be like, stop lying and slandering feminists if you're, So thank you. Because I know you'll be able to, and so she takes, the way she makes her lies is by taking the truth and veiling a bunch of facts that she doesn't want, that are important in the story.
Right.
She leaves them out.
Right.
Leaves them out.
Yeah. Back to the Butch Fem thing. I think
I think it's really important that we've expanded it so that people feel comfortable. And I don't necessarily there's this authentic self that you have to reveal. I think you create your authentic self by all of the decisions that you make. You know, so that I'm on Fems and the Butches on Butches, I don't know how that works, but more power to them. You homosexual,
Quite wonderful.
You homosexual, you, yeah. The Butches on Butches.
Well, I mean, let's face it, Stone Butch on Stone Butch, it's probably
Yeah, that probably won't work.
probably not.
But I want to go back to what you said about it being like a call and response, because that's why I don't like to identify as either, because I feel like I flow in and out depending on that call and response. Like for some people bring out in me that I want to completely surrender to them, and I want to be completely like, you know, surrendered. But then for some people, I want to be the one
want to be top.
right.
So it's a negotiation. Yeah.
There's an old term going back to the old days. You're Butch, Fem, or Kai Kai. And Kai Kai was very much looked down on in this, and it was something that it was a woman who would sometimes express clothing-wise in every which way as a Butch and other times as a Fem. And I think we're now expanding to we're being truer to ourselves and our needs. Almost
Okay.
like the old Kai Kai has become something good.
Oh, okay.
Instead of a pejorative.
Well, and you know what's fascinating to me is the rhetoric is so much like the trans rhetoric about gender fluidity. It's like lesbians actually are doing this as women. They're playing with these, you know, sex roles and stereotypes and flipping them around and subverting them and having fun with them and making it into something that can truly be playful and ultimately maybe liberating, because I hear what you're saying. I'm not either. I don't want to be either. I'm, you know, and different people bring different things out in me.
Right.
And let's, you know, explore together.
But maybe the language of Butch and Fem is the limitation. So
Limitation.
maybe
That's
trans
what
is a
I'm saying.
response to the limitation of language.
And maybe we
Well,
should not even use the word
No,
trans.
because their languages.
Okay. Let's get away from this and just bring it back to ourselves as women.
Exactly. Let's do
Because
it.
who has the time or
Yeah,
the
right.
energy? This
Right.
is about us.
Exactly.
So, but it's also conflating top and bottom with Butch and Fem.
Right.
Those don't mesh.
They don't mesh.
They don't mesh. I mean, it's like, you know, I've had lovers who have been Butch bottoms, and they're like on their back instantly, right? Do me,
Yes.
right? And they don't want another Butch to do them. They want a Fem to do them,
Yeah.
right? And then there's reciprocity, right? I mean, that also happens, but we can't necessarily tie top with Butch and bottom with Fem, because
And women have been doing this for forever.
Right, before these.
Before they're
Right.
work it out together.
Yeah.
What we find mutually beneficial, mutually pleasurable.
and it can change.
Yes, and even, you know, not abuse, but even playing with dominance and submissiveness, that aspect of it too. You play with it. If it becomes like a rigid rule, then it's not playful anymore, and it's not
Right.
healthy anymore.
Gosh, I just, you know, when I was growing up in high school, I fell in love with all my best friends, and I would just have these very innocent, but yet, I don't know, effervescent type spiritual experiences of us holding hands and like running through this field together and
Owning two cats.
you know, and yes, it was very romantic and it was very egalitarian. It was very egalitarian, and it was very much like embracing your own self in your sister as an equal. And I think that, to me, that's the goal of lesbianism, is to...
So what Butch and Fem provides is that for sex to remain vibrant in a relationship, for lesbians, you have to have similarity, another woman. You also have to have difference, because without difference, you don't create sexual tension. And Butch Fem creates sexual
I
tension.
see. Okay. All right.
That was my entry point.
Yeah.
I get you.
I didn't have any other perspective.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I get you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
How wonderful to evolve.
It's so wonderful.
Isn't it wonderful?
Yeah. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to say? Because I'll just end this. This is great. Thank you. I mean, women need to be able to hear these discussions, and it is primarily women who are listening to this, but I really appreciated that sister's comment about lesbianism and discussions among lesbians, by lesbians, for lesbians can be beneficial to the larger picture of this global world. I think that that's true, and so I just thank all of our WLRN listeners for being there. Hello to Sarah Sullivan and Elizabeth Miller and Laureen and Laura. And I'm going to stop this video. And do you all want to say, if you want to say one last thing before we stop, or?
Let's just go around.
Can,
You always love a last word. Go for it, woman.
can we say your names? Is it okay to say?
Yeah.
So this is Bim.
I'm Bim Burns.
Bim Burns.
Amos Brigham.
Felon Evans.
Tina Feldstein. Ashley.
All right, and I'm Thistle, and this was really great. So thank you so much, and signing off.